everyone. Essentially, this is a debrief of the 3-part series I posted the last few weeks. I talked about my exes, what went wrong, and what I learned from them. In this video, I'm going to expand on those points to help you learn from my experience so you can save yourself from going through the same pain.
Here's a recap.
Ex number 1. We dated for a few years. We grew into adults together during the transition from high school to university before we concluded our difference in religion was too much of a barrier for this relationship to continue. Ex number 2, we dated for over a year. I loved the stability of his presence and the emotional maturity he helped me develop, but our lifestyles and goals were too different. Ex number 3, dated for a few months. He made me laugh a lot, and he had what the last ex didn't have: independence, but we ended due to his lack of commitment. Ex number 4, we dated for a few years. He had charisma, a mysterious aura, and everyone in his presence seemed to really admire and respect him. Spoiler alert, I came to realize that this was carefully curated by him. We ended because he was a very toxic person and therefore I was miserable. So, starting our deep dive. What I didn't mention about ex number 1 was that we broke up and got back together quite a few times, and the reason was always the same. Sometimes he wanted to prioritize the relationship because we were so happy together, and other times he felt guilty and wanted to focus on his family and religion. As mentioned in the series, I was a young teenager who was short-sighted. I knew I was happy in the moment, but I didn't think about the future implications. I was closed-minded in thinking that the only thing that mattered in a relationship was me and the other person. Take it from me that there is a lot of value to considering the other person's family, your own family, whether they would all get along, whether religion is the center of either person's life, etc., etc. Something else I learnt from this breakup was that sharing updates and details about your dating life with family and friends is essential. They can help give you a less biased perspective on whether the person is right for you or not, and if it ends, you have people to talk about it with. If you only talk to them about it after the fact, you may make them feel used for only opening up when you need them. It's a great win-win for your non-romantic relationships in general. It helps to bring you all closer. Moving on to number 2. He had experienced a lot of trauma at home, so was a little scared to step out of his comfort zones. I like that every time I wanted to be away from home or closer to the city, he was at home. Since he was always at home, he had a lot of time to reflect on himself. I'm of the opinion that he was very emotionally mature. He helped me realize some habits I had that I could improve on, but the problem was that emotional maturity was the only maturity he possessed. He was yet to learn how to drive, to cook, hold a part-time job, talk to strangers in person or on the phone, basic adult tasks that help you progress in life. My learning here is to embrace the uncomfortability of being single and stressed. When things get tough, let yourself feel the negative emotions rather than jumping to something that can quickly and too easily numb that. And ex number 3. I wouldn't say I might have approached this relationship differently. The reason we ended was because timing wasn't right, I suppose, but also some people come into your life just to teach or enlighten you about something. So most likely, not the right person either way. I helped him realize he wants long-term relationships, and he showed me how non-conventional relationships can be like. And lastly, and I'd say least happy, least respectful relationship I've been in, number 4. The bright side of this experience is I learnt to pick up red flags as they are, to raise my standards in general, to let myself cry, to be able to pick myself up when I'm feeling down, to find joy in solo hobbies. I was inspired to make art again. So to get into the nitty-gritty negative things related to this relationship, I have a few typical behaviors that I want to talk about that he possessed that show toxicity from the other person. Number 1, he was quite passive-aggressive. As an example, there were many times where he would say, "I'm fine," but his actions would heavily say otherwise. He might throw things lightly, he might stomp on something, he might slam doors, but yet verbally he would say, "No, I'm not bothered, I'm fine." So it was quite scary because the conversation couldn't open up for us to talk about it, but yet I was feeling quite uncomfortable in his presence. I felt like he could be more aggressive, more dangerous to either me or him, even though he wasn't. It's more that feeling that it could happen. You're on edge the whole time and you just don't feel safe in general. The second point is that he criticizes and judges from the sidelines. So what it felt like was that everything I did wasn't good enough and everything I did in general just wasn't great. For example, in one of our first dates, I'm pretty sure like the second date that we had, I remember we were sitting on the couch together and he looked at my arm and said, "You go to the gym, right?" And I was like, "Yep." And he's like, "Do you work on triceps?" And I was like, "Not recently." And his response, I kid you not, was, "I can tell." I know that that can be a joke to a lot of people and between some certain friends, but that's usually after you've established a relative rapport with each other. If you were just getting to know each other, it's, in my opinion, just objectively not a nice way to joke. So yeah, that's an example of that. He is condescending and acts superior. So from the way that he talked about everything in life, he was never wrong. Even if you proved that he was wrong, he would either immediately change the conversation or he would spin the words around to make it sound like I'm wrong, even though we both know that he is wrong. He denies and dismisses my feelings. Oh, that happened all the time. And one of the examples I have is that what he would say very often is that if I ever cried was, "I feel like you're crying to manipulate me, to make me feel bad for you." I thought this was a crazy concept because I personally can't fake cry. I can't pretend to cry. When I cry, I actually have a lot of tears coming out of my eyes, so I thought that it was very unusual for him to insinuate that. And in general, it was very toxic because I never felt comfortable showing huge emotions in front of him. And in the same vein, he would get very angry whenever I got upset, and he wouldn't give me the chance to talk about why I'm upset. So if I were to display symptoms of being mad, upset, whatever, he would immediately get angry at me that I am even upset in the first place. And if I were to ask, "Can we talk about why I'm upset?" he would say, "I'm just mad at why you're upset, so don't even talk to me right now." That's basically how that conversation would go. I would not have the chance to talk about it because he would say, "I don't feel like talking about it," or "I'm too mad to talk about it because you're mad in the first place." Another way he is toxic is that he identifies as a victim, and the most common, most prominent way was the fact that he was cheated on by his ex in the past, so he would always reference that whenever he displayed certain behaviors, especially being way too distrustful of my actions. So anytime I hung out with a guy friend, for example, he would have to tell me, "Oh, this person's not good because they seem to be too flirty," or "This person's okay because they don't seem to know how to flirt," as an example. Another way is that he makes unreasonable demands. He says that when we're visiting my family, we have to leave within a few hours because he gets bored. But yet, when I visit them, he would say that he wants to join. So I had no good opportunity to hang out with them enough. And also, he never came to mine. He always wanted me to go to his place because he said that my place was too boring. There wasn't enough things to do. It wasn't enough to hang out with me. He just didn't like being here because he was so bored. Another way is that he turns my problems into his dramas. So my problems where I naturally would want to tell my partner about, let's say I have a colleague that I don't really like, and so I want to discuss that with him. He would be quite dismissive of it and say, "Oh, I'm busy right now," or "Oh, I don't think you should tell me this because it makes me feel bad." And there was actually this one time I had written notes about this colleague because I needed to process those thoughts to help me remember what was going on at work and to brainstorm how to fix it. And when he saw those notes, he said, "I feel so uncomfortable that you wrote this all down. Just don't show me that. I don't like it." It's suddenly all about him, even though it was nothing to do with him. And it used to be something that I would share with him, but I would stop. Just a lot of ways for me to not feel like I'm comfortable being myself around him or sharing parts of my life with him. Another way is that he belittles and blames me for all sorts of things. So if there's anything that goes wrong, he'll say something that kind of sounds like a joke, but you know that it's not really joking because of how often he says it and the way that he says it. So for example, he might say, "You're just not that smart," or "You're just really slow and that's why it went wrong." And for example, if I were to say that someone wasn't very nice, he might joke and say, "Well, maybe you were just being annoying." So blaming me for things that are happening. There's no benefit of doubt. There's no support, there's just blame. So another thing is that he is very reactive to questioning or criticism. Even if it's on a very small scale, I'm not even trying to accuse him of anything, but look out for him. So for example, there's this one day I remember he was very tired and he really didn't feel like going to see his friends to have a drink up at their place. So I asked him, why don't you not go this time? And he got quite mad. And essentially the gist of his response was to say that he has to always say yes to invites if he can, otherwise he won't be invited again. So one, from my point of view, it's not very nice that he got mad at me asking this question because I'm just looking out for him. He complains, I'm trying to find a solution, and he gets mad at my suggestion. Or not even a suggestion yet. I'm insinuating a suggestion. I'm not even there yet. I'm just asking a question. I'm trying to be open. I'm trying to ask him an open question. But anyways, number two, he seemed quite insecure about his friendships. It's like he knew that they didn't have a deep enough connection, that the only way for them to continue being his friend is for him to always be present. That was quite flawed thinking in my opinion. A really typical way to show toxicity that has been a topic of the last decade or so is him gaslighting me. I guess it's something that you don't necessarily know about per se and maybe think that it's a joke until you experience it yourself. Because if I were to explain to you what gaslighting is, it's when someone convinces you that something happened when it didn't, or you said something when you didn't, or you did something when you didn't. They're making you question your reality. From your point of view, you might be thinking, I'm a logical person. Why would that happen to me? Why would that affect me? I'll just think about the facts and I'll be fine. But no, if you put yourself in the situation of being in a relationship where you fight every single weekend, you argue so much, but you don't actually resolve most of your issues, you get to the point where you've argued about it so much that certain details seem to matter, such as did that person say no? Did that person pick up their clothes from the floor? Or did that person wash the dishes? At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, but because it's an argument that blows up so much, you keep thinking about it. And when the other person insists that it is something that you insist is not, you start to think, if they're fighting so hard for their answer to be correct, and from my point of view, I don't really care what the answer is, I just want to get this resolved, you convince your brain that maybe you're just wrong. And imagine that happening so many times that you start thinking that maybe you're just getting forgetful, maybe you've been stressed so you forgot things momentarily. But no, if this person does it very often, they are making you question your reality. You are not losing brain cells or whatever they're convincing you of. Just know that this does happen between two adults that are supposed to love each other. So another one that I really don't like is that he uses platitudes in place of genuine insight. There's certain things that happen in life and they're unfortunate or whatever. In my opinion, what's ideal is that you reflect and use those experiences to be better or make sure it doesn't happen again. But instead he'll use very high level, very generic statements to shrug it off. Like the very commonly used in New Zealand, she'll be right. And for him, for example, he used the phrase, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And that was usually used when he was drinking a lot of alcohol. I personally hate that cycle of, oh my God, I have to drink tonight because I got to have a good time. And then the next morning you feel like crap and you're like, I'm never doing that again. I shouldn't have done that. I don't like this life that I'm living. But then the next week or two, you do it all over again. And then while you're drinking and your girlfriend's trying to tell you maybe you shouldn't, you say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I guess you look cool in front of your friends maybe, but I'm of the opinion that's a red flag. Another one is better late than never. That's a classic one. If you're late to certain places, you just say that to make it sound like, wow, the situation could be worse, but it is not, so we're fine, right? You're convincing other people to just shrug it off. But if it becomes a habit, it is toxic to just use that statement to shrug it off. And the classic one that I personally probably hate the most is don't get your knickers in a twist. Yes, maybe it's a funny phrase to use once in a while, depending on the situation. But if you use it every second time your girlfriend's upset, it's not very nice when you as the girlfriend want to talk about things, but he instead tries to tell you to calm down essentially. That's not productive and that's not very nice. So that's all from me today. Thank you for listening. Hope you learnt something or got some insight that you can bring into your dating life to make sure you don't date an idiot for a few years the way I did. Bye.